Necessity is the mother of invention. Somebody really, really smart said that a really, really long time ago, but I couldn't tell you who and I couldn't tell you when. But it will be pertinent to what we're talking about today. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. My name is Drew. I know a lot of you guys are new and it's been a while since I posted a video, so let me introduce myself. My name is Drew. I am the head Madlad and founder of Madlad Instruments, and I'm currently the only Madlad at the moment. But Madlad Instruments is a company that I have started out of my garage, and I build instruments. I build guitar bodies, bass bodies, full guitars, full basses I'm working on, and some other fun shenanigans that we'll get into along the way. But I've been so blessed to be in this industry. I've learned a lot so far, and a little bit of history about Madlad. I started about a year and a half ago, January of 2024, I think was my official kickoff date. And through that time, I've had a lot of learning. There was a time when I was building full guitars and wanting to just get into guitar building and selling guitars off the rip. Then I had some very poignant advice given to me by a good friend named Trey, who said, hey, you should probably focus on just like one or two things and get really good at that so that you can make a little bit of money and bankroll your other research areas and start getting good at other things and slowly build up from there. And so I took that advice, and now I am in the business of building guitar bodies and bass bodies. And I'm kind of at the chapter in the Madlad life where I have been very blessed that a lot of people like buying my guitar and bass bodies. And I am like I said, so blessed. It blows my mind away that people from all over the country come and find me, my little shop on Reverb, and choose to patronize me and support my small business. And it just means the world. So if you have ever been a customer of Madlad, if you're a Madlad yourself, thank you so much. And shout outs to all the people that inspired me to do this video. Shout outs to Scott and Matthew B. All of you, you know who you are. But anyway, I built a lot of guitar bodies. To this point, I've built many tens of guitar bodies and shipped them all over the country. And I've gotten fairly good, from what I hear, at building guitar bodies from all different materials. And one of the common sort of through lines that I get is naturally, pun intended, because this is a natural finish, about guitar finishing. And I'm not an expert with guitar finishing. The world of guitar finishing is so very broad. There are so many different ways that you can finish a guitar, and there are many beautiful ways to go about it. And there's all sorts of things from nitrocellulose to polyurethane and everything in between. But one thing that really gets overlooked is oil finishes, at least in my opinion. Not a lot of people are doing oil finishes on their bodies, and that there's a very good reason for that, which we'll get into for a second. But when I was out there researching and looking around for tutorials on how to do a Danish oil body, there are some videos, but nothing that was so comprehensive that I think it covered everything in the way that I would feel comfortable giving it to a client. So in that way, again, necessity is the mother of invention. I'm just going to do it myself. So today's a video all about Danish oil finishing. And if you can't tell already, I'm a bit of a yapper. So this is designed to be not like a hands-on how-to, but I'm going to talk you through my process because I am a bit of a talker. We'll have some time here in between where I'll show some clips where I'm actually finishing this, but I really designed these videos to kind of be taken where you can just kind of listen to them when you're working in the shop. You can watch other stuff or do other stuff while you're listening and hopefully absorb it all through osmosis. Or if you're actually in the process of watching or like finishing a guitar, you can watch this a couple times just to get familiar with the process and then just reference it whenever you need it. So, with that in mind, I'll also put the disclaimer at the start that, again, I'm not the biggest expert. I'm still learning a lot about, guitar finishing. Please take this video with other videos as well that you can find about the process and find whatever method works best for you. But I'll show you what works for me, and hopefully we'll all have a good old time. So, let's talk a little bit about Danish oil and what Danish oil actually is. Let me get my can of Danish oil right here. So I use Wattco Danish oil, and this is the stuff that I recommend to everybody. But fundamentally, a Danish oil, to my understanding, is some sort of wood finishing oil. So you can have something like teak oil, which I have right here. This is teak oil. There's other oils out there like linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, as well as another really popular one. Danish oil is just one of those finishing oils, and there are added chemicals that allow the finish to polymerize or to dry a little bit more quickly. And those are just fancy words to mean that the oil dries a little bit more quickly, it's easier to work with, and thusly you can start putting more coats on more quickly and build up the finish a lot quicker. Because traditional linseed oil is used for a lot of different things. It's been used in furniture making. It's also been used in paintings, like fine art and stuff like that. They'll use it to preserve paintings. It takes a very long time to dry. on the order of days, months, or even years sometimes, depending on how thick the coat is. So needless to say, I'm thankful that we have modern sort of products that allow us to do things a little bit more quickly. Hopefully that gives you a rundown. Every formula for Danish oil is going to be a little bit different. Watco's is going to differ from other manufacturers, but this is the stuff that I use. You can get it readily at your local hardware store. I think you can get it at Lowe's. I got this from Rockler, so it's a little bit bigger, it costs a little bit more, but since I'm doing more guitars, this is the one that I use. So if you're looking for a professional recommendation, I recommend Watco. I've used them personally. And the other ones out there, like I said, there's only so many ways that you can spin Danish oil, so I don't think you can go too wrong. But see what other people are using as well. There's a wealth of information out there. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a rundown on Danish oil and what it does. Now the question is, how do you go about applying Danish oil? And what I'll say before we get into that is, let's do a little minor aside here. Woodworking and guitar building are very, very close. They are birds with a feather. Remember that when you are assembling your guitar, you are basically taking a raw slab of wood and you are turning it into something that sings and looks cool. But fundamentally, it started as a piece of wood. Whenever you're thinking about guitar finishing, think woodworking. There's a lot of woodworking finishes that also work on guitars. So if you're ever figuring out like a new fun finish or something like that, go check the world of fine woodworking. If they can do it on that, then you can probably do it on a guitar. So with that in mind, what I've found from a lot of the videos that I've seen out there in the woodworking world is that Danish oil and really all oil finishes are what we call penetrating finishes. So with nitrocellulose and polyurethane, what you're doing is you are building up a coat or a shield or a shell on top of the bare wood of the guitar. Think of it kind of like an M&M. So you have the wood as the nice candy center, and then you have the hard shell on the outside so that it melts in your mouth and not in your hand. I don't know if M&M still does that as their advertising, but that is the idea of a top coat. You're building up layers of a shell to basically protect the wood from the environment, from changes in moisture, from getting dinged, all that sort of stuff. So you build up on top of it. An oil finish or a penetrating finish will, instead of sitting on top of the wood, actually penetrate into the pores of the wood, and then they crystallize, creating kind of like a resin almost, and then that fills in the gaps in between the grains, and then you can sand that back, and then basically it all mixes together. Again, not a fine woodworker, but my pet theory from what I've learned in experimentation, step back there and there was something grazing my calf. It's just a little bit of surgical tubing that I use for gluing necks. But that distraction out of the way. My pet theory is that when you are working with an oil finish, what happens is when you sand it, especially at a really fine grit, you get all this very, very fine dust that then mixes with the oil, and it creates kind of like a pseudo filler or pseudo putty. And that pseudo putty starts to fill into those really small micropores that you usually don't get with other sanding methods or like the higher grits. And that's what gets you to that really, really smooth sort of feel on the actual, surface of the body. It's the same thing with polyurethane and nitro. When you're doing level sanding on poly and nitro, you're basically knocking down the finish and making it level so that all of the finish kind of fills into those little ridges. It's very similar with oil. It's happening inside of the grain and not in the layer of finish that you're putting on top. So very similar in that way. So think of it as a penetrating finish. So it is going to penetrate the wood, it's going to permeate the wood, it's going to crystallize, and then you can sand it back and then continually add coats to penetrate the oil further, and you build up the coats that way. With that, Danish oil finishes probably aren't going to get to the same glossy level that you could expect from poly or nitro, especially when they're buffed. Because the wood is being permeated and you're going into the surface of the wood, what you're really left with is just the soaked kind of top layer of it. So all the grains that are on the top that are soaked with oil, that's what you get left with. And so you still have their wood fibers, and so they don't have a whole lot of luster to them. So that's why it's probably not going to be as glossy as nitro or poly. If you want to really, really mirror finish, you probably want to go to the route of nitro and poly. That's what I'm trying to say. But Danish oil finishes can still be very, very beautiful. And what they look really, really great on are like nice pieces of wood that have really, really wide grain, like this one piece ash body that I have right here. And what's also really, really great about natural finishes that you can't really see through the screen, but you can feel it. Danish oil leaves a really, really nice texture, especially around these deep veins or these deep grain lines. If you could run your finger over it, you can feel just a little bit of texture to these, because the oil, while it penetrates and fills in those tighter grains, On the more open grains, it's going to take more and more oil to get in there and fill that in. So it leaves a really, really nice natural texture. It leaves a really, really nice natural luster. And if you do it right, this is a very, very gorgeous finish that is kind of reminiscent of like violins or old like stringed instruments like a violin or a cello and stuff like that. It is very, very close to like a varnish finish or like a more natural finish that you would see on a fine instrument like that. So with that in mind, that's a little bit of yapping about what Danish oil is, the nature of how it works. And now that we know how it works, that it's penetrating in, we can talk a little bit about the strategy. So here's the part that you've all been waiting for. Drew, finally just tell us, how do you do a Danish oil finish? Let's get into it. So first things first, you're going to want to sand your body to 220, 320. There's a really great video from, I call him Woodworking Grandpa, but he's, I'll put it down below. It's the guy with the curly hair and the glasses. He's in his shop. He did a really, really great demo about the differences in grit. 320 is usually about where the pores will start to close off and not really take in as much finish or as much oil. So you want to start with either 220 or get your body up to about 220, or all Madlad bodies. I sand all my bodies up to 320. And when you buy a Madlad body, again, selfless plug, I sand it to 320 just so that it's paint ready and it's ready to take on finish. But anything sanding above that, like if you get to 400, 600 grit, which we will get to in a second, but you don't want to take the body up to that initially because you want to still have the pores to be open enough to take the actual oil and really slurp up that first coat of oil. Usually that happens around the 320 range or the 220 range. So anywhere between 220 and 320, get your body sanded to that, get it really, really nice and smooth. And you really, really want to take a really close look. On this particular body, I do have a little bit of machine marking. This is when I was still machining bodies with a 0.6 step over. This is going to be a personal build, so I'm not too worried about that, but make sure that you take the time to work out any sort of machine marks that might have been left behind by your manufacturer or anything like that. But once your body is prepped and you've got it up to like 320, we can start going. Now, because each Danish oil is a little bit different, the instructions are going to be a little bit possibly different based on your particular brand of Danish oil, so definitely check the tin. But most, if not all, Danish oils are going to start in the same way. What you're going to do is you're going to put down an initial like real big slathering. You don't have to soak the wood, like don't just like, slather the whole like thing of Danish oil across it, but really put some oil into it. Really like dab up your rag, put down a nice big coat, get both sides, and then let it sit for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then what's going to happen is you're going to come back and you put down a second lighter coat, if you can believe that. You put down a second lighter coat to just kind of allow any of that, because remember, the oil is like, here's the grain, the oil is going to seep in here, it's going to sit down here, but there's all this gap up here at the top. So that second coat is going to come in and make sure that there's enough oil to fill in like the whole crevice, if that makes sense. If you want to think about your body, this is like the area of the pore that you sanded, you filled it up to about here, that second coat's going to fill it up all the way to the top. Then you'll wipe off the excess. That will just make sure that there's no like excess pooling on the top. If you were to leave it there and the oil were to crystallize, you'll get like little bumps and little resin bumps. So you want to wipe off the oil while it's still wet. And once it is level and wiped off, you're good to go. That is your first coat. And the first coat is the most essential in Danish oil finishing. So definitely check your tin on how do you do your first coat. But once you get your first coat down, the hardest part is done. So congratulations, you got the hard part done. From there, it's just a matter of salting to taste, basically. And now I get to introduce you to one of my favorite things in the whole world of guitar building, and that is progressive sanding. Drew, what is progressive sanding? It is what it says on the tin. You progressively work through sanding grains to get to a finer and finer grain and get to a finer and finer finish. The more coats of oil that you put down, remember that whenever you sand and you put down oil, you're creating kind of a little mini paste that's going to sit into the grains and kind of level off, and more level, more flat means more shiny. So with that, once you do it with 320, what you can do is you can come back and then basically sand it. I usually dry sand because remember there's oil in it. Oil is a lubricant, so it shouldn't have any problem with like working over the top. So we started with 320. We put our oil coat, our first coat down. It's dried off. Usually give it about a day. I forgot to mention that, but give it about a day between coats just to let everything cure. But after a day, you can come back, hit it with 400. It takes all of 10 or 15 minutes to sand off the body. Hit it with 400, put down another very, very light coat, just like graze it on the top, and then go from there. And then give it another day. You can do 600, 800, all the way up to 2,000, 3,000. On this particular body, I did this up to 2,000 grit, and it's got a nice luster. But But I'd be willing to bet that if I continue to go through 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, and even onto the steel wool territory, you can get even more luster to it. Now, that's basically it. That's how you do a Danish oil finish. And then you just stop whenever you feel like you have enough finish on it, or when you really like the color, you like the luster, and you go from there. Speaking of color, remember that oil finishes do have a little bit of a tint. It is a oil, so it's going to have a little bit of luster. Some Danish oils are going to have certain coloring to it. This is a natural oil, so this is going to just maintain as much as possible the natural color of the wood. But remember, ash, let me see if I have a cut of ash that is naked. Where's my naked ash? I'll just use this one. So this is ash without any oil on it. It's a little bit blonder, a little bit lighter. This also hasn't been sanded, so keep that in mind. And this is with like 11 coats of Danish oil. So it has taken a little bit of a tan. It spent its summer doing lifeguard duties, and so it's got a little bit more tan. So just realize that Danish oil will add a little bit of color to your bodies. Typically for lighter or more blonde cuts of wood, it's going to make it a little bit darker, give it this nice tan color. For darker woods, it's not as big a deal. Like walnut, it's just going to make walnut. Walnut is one of the best woods that you can put Danish oil on because it just pops. It makes it look so much darker, and the pores really start to expose themselves, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. So Danish oil has a very, very good propensity for bringing out the natural beauty of the wood that you're working with. But all that's to say, on darker woods, it'll just make it a little bit darker and give it a little bit more luster. On the lighter woods, it'll do the same thing. It'll make it a little bit more tan. So hopefully that gives you the rundown that you need. Throughout this process, I've been weaving in some clips, as you can see, of me actually doing the buildup on these particular bodies. So check those out if you want to see like the before and after. And now, once everything is finished, typically on like a nitro or a poly sort of finish, the next question is, well, I got it all sanded off and it's looking good. Do I have to polish it? Do I have to buff it? And that was a question that I asked myself as well, and let me show you the results. I'll be right back. I did the hard part, so you don't have to. This is a pea-based body that I did, and I tested a Danish oil finish on as well. And I actually tried and polished this one. It did not work.
Whoa, what the hell?
As you can see, what polish does to Danish oil is it makes it actually a little bit more muted. Remember that we're working with bare wood here. Well, not bare wood, but like we don't have a top coat. So anything that you are putting onto the top here is seeping into the wood. And so what effectively happens with polish is that you're just rubbing that polish into the wood grain where the oil usually is. It doesn't really bring up the luster. It doesn't really do much for it. In fact, it makes it a little bit more matte, and I'm just not a fan. So like I said, I kind of did the hard part so that you don't have to learn from my mistakes, but I have the benefit of having these B-stock bodies that I can test on. And I would hate for you to have to like polish and redo the Danish oil finish on your Madlad body or whatever body that you choose to buy from. So yeah, you don't need to polish a Danish oil finish. I'm actually gonna take a sip of water here. Hydrate or dihydrate. My throat's getting just a little bit tense, in case you guys couldn't tell. It's getting to that point where your throat's saying like, do you want to keep yapping? Are you sure you really want to keep yapping? Yes, I do. The good people of the internet out there want to learn more about Danish oil finishing, so I'll happily yap about that. Care for a Danish oil finish. How do you care for your finish? A lot of the tricks that you'll learn for doing oil finishes come from the world of gun building or gunsmithing, especially gunstock builds. Danish oil is very close to true oil. If you've ever done a true oil finish. The reason that I don't do true oil, I've never actually really worked with it, but I've heard a lot of people say that it stinks to high heaven, and Danish oil has a nice smell to it. So if nothing else, it's just the aesthetics of not having a smelly oil. Let me know down below if you guys have ever worked with a true oil finish. True oil is very, very similar. True oil was originally fabricated to be used as gunstock oil. And so what a lot of people will say, there's a rule of thumb that you do 1 coat per day for a week, 1 coat per week for a month, 1 coat per month for a year, and then 1 coat per year for the rest of the life of the gunstock. Guitars are, I guess, similar. Danish oil is a little bit more durable. I don't think you need to go that overboard, but that kind of gives you the feel for the maintenance of an oil finish. Realize that it's an ongoing process, that you may have to rehydrate and give the wood a little bit of extra oil every once in a while. But again, that's a couple years down the road. You could also just kind of let it relic in that way too. Maybe you let the oil finish kind of dry out a little bit and it has a cool effect. I haven't studied it extensively, but that might be a cool relicing avenue that you can go down the road. Let me know down below if you guys have a oil finish guitar body, if you've done ever a guitar body and how it stands up over time, if there's any cool relic stuff that you can do. Alrighty, so that's a little bit more about the care of your Danish oil finish guitar. Let's talk a little bit about some final notes and some final considerations. Remember that you have a piece of wood with oil on it, basically. You don't have a protective top coat or a protective top layer. That can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. What that means as a good thing is that the guitar will relic a little bit quicker, I guess you could say, if you're really looking for like the relic or worn-in look. The guitar will ding a little bit more easily than if it has a top coat. Remember that Nitro and Poly are meant not just as protective coatings for like weather and humidity, but they also give a little bit of a durability to the guitar, and they chip away before the actual wood in the body does. With Danish oil, you have just basically the wood with some oil inside of it, so it's going to ding just a little bit more easily than those other finishes. So just be mindful of that. Also, keep in mind that your guitar is just a little bit more susceptible to changes in weather, because changes in moisture content, changes in heat will affect the wood and some of the oil inside of it. Insofar as, maybe you have to retune your guitar a little bit more and stuff like that. I haven't done extensive research on how weather affects guitars, especially Danish oil guitars, but just be mindful. You probably don't want to play this in the middle of a rainstorm or somewhere where it's super duper humid, and you probably don't want to play it in the middle of a desert. But if you're playing it in an AC controlled environment with relatively good humidity, you should be good to go. And then if you want to go above and beyond, like, some of the really cool guitar players out there, whenever you get to a gig or a different environment, just leave your case open for 10 or 15 minutes, let the guitar acclimate to the environment that it's going to be sitting in, then tune it up, make sure everything is nice and tight, do any adjustments that you need to, and then go from there. So that is the rundown on Danish oil finishes. I think we spent like 5 minutes talking about how to actually do the finish, but the other, however much long this video is just me yapping and talking about something that's really, really cool. I really like Danish oil finishes. It is a slept-on finish, at least in my opinion. I mentioned earlier that a lot of larger builders don't really do oil finishes, and that's perfectly fine. Poly and Nitro are a lot easier to spray and a lot easier to do at scale. They don't need as much care. You don't need to have somebody like putting down oil every single day and waiting a day between coats. So I understand why bigger builders don't do it, but I like doing it, and I'm small enough now that I can continue to do it. So it just leaves this gorgeous, gorgeous look. So this particular build is going to be a personal build. I'm going to be doing a black pickguard build on this one. So definitely make sure that you're subscribed, because I have a whole series of build logs coming out for this particular guitar. You get to see it built up from just this to an awesome sort of natural finished classical blues machine. I think that's kind of the picture that I have in my head. So definitely make sure that you're subscribed. Also, if you're looking to get your own body or get a body, I'll plug my stuff again, Reverb Shop down below. If you want to get a nice piece of Drew's ash body, I don't know how long I'm going to take this innuendo. We'll see down below. If it's cringe, let me know down in the comments. But yeah, whenever you buy a body from Madlad, you're also supporting not just my local business, but the local scene here in DFW, by the way. Shout outs to Adrift. This is their shirt. Let Them Rot was one of their songs and one of their EPs. They now have a full-fledged album. My buddy Trey, who I was talking about earlier, who gave me that really sage advice, him and my other buddy Taylor are both in the band. They do an amazing melodic hardcore set. All of their songs have a lot of amazing meaning. Definitely check them out. They're here in the DFW area. And every video I'm going to try and wear a shirt from a local band, so I love supporting the local acts and stuff like that. You should too. Go out and find, if you have a local scene or a local bar scene, just find the local bar and a local act that you can follow. And give some love to our local musicians, because in the hyper-commodified and hyper-capital, like late-stage capitalist music environment that we live in, where everything is about streams and numbers and stuff like that, a lot of the really genuine music that is back to the music is in local scenes. And if you want really genuine, back to roots music, it's probably in your backyard. You just don't realize it. So shout outs to Adrift, shout outs to all the local acts here in DFW. Let me know down below what acts I should be checking out. Or if you have a band, let me know down below. And if you have merch and we vibe, let me know. I'll definitely check out your stuff. And if you have a cool sound or I dig the vibes, then I'll see if I can buy a shirt and rep you guys in a future video. So go support your local scene. That's what I'm trying to say. And we'll wrap up today's video in the normal way. And that is me saying, always thank you so much for watching, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, do all that sort of stuff. But even if you don't do that, I'm just so thankful that you took some time out of your busy day to spend some time with me. It means the world, especially given how little time that we have in this life. So be good to one another. Always remember that you were wanted, you were loved, and you were appreciated. You have a special talent that nobody else has, and the world is waiting on you to bring it out. So muster a little courage, go out into the world, and change it. That's what the world's waiting on. You.